So if you're here, if your old identity is crumbling, let it fall, let it burn. You're not becoming less, you're making room for something more, something true. No one tells you how much grief comes with this part. You'll grieve versions of yourself you clung to. Dreams you now see were never really yours, people who no longer recognize you. But in the ashes of that grief, something new begins to stir. A life not built from conditioning, but from truth, and that's where the real journey begins. You encounter your shadow. You thought awakening would feel like light, peace, clarity, bliss. But instead, it feels like darkness. Something begins to surface, something you've tried to hide, repress, deny, a version of you that is raw, emotional, irrational, wounded, and strangely powerful. This is your shadow. Carl Jung defined the shadow as everything within us that we refuse to see. The parts we've disowned, the rage we swallowed, the fear we never voiced, the desires we called wrong, the grief we buried so deep we forgot it was there. When the true self begins to awaken, it doesn't just rise in purity, it rises through the shadow, and that means meeting every part of you that you left behind in the dark. This encounter isn't metaphorical, it's deeply emotional. You may start having vivid dreams, nightmares, flashbacks from childhood. You may be overwhelmed by sudden bursts of anger, sadness, or anxiety that seem to come from nowhere. They're not coming from nowhere. They're coming from within. The shadow is not your enemy. It's not evil. It's not there to destroy you. It's the part of you that holds your rejected life force, and now it wants to be seen. This is where many people turn back. They think something is going wrong. They label these feelings as depression or weakness. They run to distractions, to numbness, to old patterns. But if you stay, if you face what's rising, something extraordinary happens. You begin to recover the energy you lost, pretending to be someone else. The moment you stop running from the shadow, you stop running from yourself. You start to remember the child who was silenced, the teenager who was shamed, the adult who had to bury their truth to survive. And with every emotion that surfaces, with every memory that returns, you begin to reclaim pieces of your soul. Jung believed that shadow work is not just psychological, it's spiritual, because until you've faced your darkness, you cannot truly know your light. The ego prefers comfort. The self demands truth, and truth is messy, it's emotional, it's filled with contradictions, but it's real. As you move through this shadow phase, you may find yourself crying without knowing why, remembering things you thought you'd forgotten, feeling shame, guilt, or anger. You can't rationalize, reacting to life in ways that feel unfamiliar, even wild, questioning whether you're losing it, but you're not losing it. You're losing the lie. This is soul retrieval. This is the descent into the unconscious that precedes every rebirth. In mythology, the hero always goes into the underworld before returning transformed. In Jungian terms, this is the confrontation with the shadow before the emergence of the self. And here's the paradox. The more shadow you integrate, the more whole you become. Not perfect, not flawless, but real, rooted, fully alive. So if the darkness is rising in you, if parts of you are surfacing that you don't recognize or understand, know this: you are not breaking down, you are breaking through. The shadow is not here to destroy you, it is here to deliver you. To yourself, a mysterious inner voice appears. There comes a moment after the collapse, after the shadow, when a silence settles inside you, but it's not empty, it's alive. Out of that silence, something begins to speak, not loudly, not logically, but clearly. It's not a thought, it's not a belief, it's not the chattering voice of the ego that always wants to be heard. No, this is different. This is a whisper from the soul. Jung called it the voice of the self. an inner guide that doesn't argue, doesn't justify, and doesn't scream. It simply knows, and when you hear it for the first time, it can stop you in your tracks. It may come as a sudden intuition, a knowing that defies logic, or a deep, visceral feeling in your chest that says, "Go this way." This voice often appears in moments of stillness, when you're walking alone, when you wake up from a strange dream, when you're staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. with no answers, and suddenly you feel guided, not by something outside of you, but from the deepest core of who you are. The self, according to Jung, is the totality of the psyche, conscious and unconscious, and when the self awakens, it begins to lead. This voice doesn't flatter your ego, it doesn't tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes it will guide you away from everything you thought you needed. It may tell you to quit the job, to leave the relationship, to walk straight into the unknown. And even though it terrifies, you know it's right. How do you recognize this voice? You'll feel it as a calm certainty that doesn't need to explain itself, an urge that feels aligned, not anxious, a deep inner yes or no that doesn't waver, an inner resonance, as if your soul just exhaled. You may doubt it at first. We all do. After a lifetime of listening to the world's noise, hearing your own soul again feels almost foreign. You might ask, how do I know this isn't just my imagination? But what if your imagination is the language of the soul? What if that voice you're hearing is the part of you that never forgot who you truly are? This is not fantasy. This is inner alignment, the beginning of living not from the mind, but from the center. Jung taught that once the self emerges, it becomes the organizing principle of your life. Things begin to shift. What once seemed random begins to feel guided. Your actions feel rooted in something deeper. And for the first time, you feel like you're not walking alone. Even if you are, you're being led by something ancient, something wise, something you, not the you the world shaped, but the you that has always been waiting, quietly at the edge of your awareness. And the more you trust this voice, the louder it becomes, not in volume, but in presence. So if you've begun to hear this inner whisper, this subtle guidance that asks you to listen deeper, walk slower, trust more, don't ignore it. That voice is not your mind losing control, it's your soul taking the wheel. Synchronicities and the sacred separation. At this stage of awakening, reality itself begins to feel different. Time stretches, events feel orchestrated. You look at a clock and see repeating numbers. You think of someone and they call. You ask a question in silence and the answer appears in a song lyric, a book title, a stranger's passing words. These are not coincidences, they are synchronicities. Carl Jung coined this term to describe meaningful coincidences, moments where outer events align with your inner state in ways that defy logic, but speak to the soul. Synchronicities are the breadcrumbs of the self, signs that your inner transformation is echoing out into the world. They feel like the universe is whispering back, yes, keep going. In a waking world obsessed with control and logic, synchronicity feels like magic, but it's not magic. It's the hidden architecture of your psyche, aligning with the greater pattern of life. And when this begins to happen more frequently, not just once, but again and again, it's a sign that your awakening is no longer just internal, it's becoming embodied. But this emergence comes with a cost, and that cost is separation. People begin to fall away, not in anger, not always in conflict, often just in silence. Friends you once shared everything with no longer feel close. Conversations feel forced. Have you ever felt that something deep inside you is changing, but you can't quite explain what? On the surface, everything looks the same. Your daily routine, your relationships, even your face in the mirror. But underneath, something stirs. Quiet restlessness, A strange pull from the depths of your being, a whisper that says you are not who you think you are. This is not just another spiritual video. This is a calling for those who are going through an invisible but irreversible change. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who explored the hidden layers of the human psyche, believed that awakening doesn't come through words or rituals. It begins when the ego starts to collapse, when everything you once identified with, your roles, your beliefs, your sense of control, begins to dissolve. And in that disorienting silence, your true self, what Jung called the self, begins to rise from the depths. This awakening is not loud. It doesn't come with spiritual fireworks or instant clarity. It comes in silence, in grief, in sleepless nights and unanswered questions, but also in rare and fleeting moments comes a peace so deep you can't explain it. You can only feel it. Maybe you're in that moment right now. Maybe you've started to question everything. You've begun to feel detached from the person you used to be. You crave solitude, but not to escape, rather to find something real. If this is happening to you, don't ignore it. Don't push it away. It may be the most important thing that has ever happened to you. It may be the birth of your soul. In this video, we'll uncover 5 powerful signs that your true self is beginning to awaken from the unconscious. These signs are not comfortable. They often look like confusion, pain, or even chaos. But beneath them, something sacred is unfolding. You're not broken, you're breaking through. This is the moment when the old you begins to fall away, and the self, that vast, timeless center within, begins to lead your life. So I invite you to listen closely, not just with your mind, but with that part of you that remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. This journey won't give you easy answers, but it may give you something far more valuable, a glimpse into your soul. Let's begin. What does it mean to awaken the true self? Most people go through life never meeting their true self. They build a personality. They chase success, approval, love. They wear a mask so well, they forget it's not their real face. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the version of ourselves we create to survive in society, polite, polished, predictable, but behind it lies a different presence, something ancient, quiet, vast. This is the self. The self is not a role you play. It's not your thoughts or your preferences. It's not your trauma or your titles. The self is the totality of who you truly are, the union of your conscious ego and the infinite unconscious within. To awaken the self is not to become something new. It is to remember something eternal. It is to feel the gravity of your own soul pulling you inward, toward wholeness, toward depth, toward truth. But this awakening doesn't feel beautiful at first. It feels like confusion. It feels like loss, because the ego, your old identity, fights to survive. You might begin to feel like nothing makes sense anymore. The goals you once chased lose their meaning. The relationships you once clung to start to feel hollow. You realize that much of what you called life was just a performance. And now the curtain is falling. This is the moment many people call a crisis, but Jung saw it differently. He called it the process of individuation, the sacred journey of becoming who you truly are. Individuation isn't about self-improvement. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming whole, and to become whole, you must face the parts of yourself you've ignored, denied, or buried. Your fears, your shadow, your hidden dreams, and yes, your own soul. This path is not easy. It will strip you of illusions. It will take away your certainty. But in its place, it will give you something infinitely more valuable. A life that is real. A life that is yours. When the self begins to awaken, something within you stops playing the game. You start to crave truth more than comfort. You begin to feel emotions you haven't let yourself feel in years. Sometimes you cry for no reason, sometimes you feel empty, but sometimes you feel alive in a way you never have before. That's the paradox. The path to the true self often begins in darkness, but in that darkness, a light is born. You may not be able to explain it to anyone. You may feel alone in this experience, but know this, you are not alone. Many before you have walked this path, and many will walk it after you. It is the most ancient of human journeys, the journey back to the center of your being. So if you're feeling lost, disoriented, or like everything is falling apart, you may actually be right where you're supposed to be, not broken, but breaking open. The true self is not an idea. It is a living presence within you, waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard, waiting to lead. And once you begin to follow it, there is no turning back. Your old identity begins to collapse. It starts quietly. At first, you might dismiss it as burnout, boredom, or a passing phase, but deep inside, something feels off. The things that once gave you joy now feel strangely hollow. The routines that once defined you begin to feel like cages. And the voice inside, the one that always told you who you are, goes silent. This is the beginning of the collapse. Carl Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Because when you begin to awaken, the first thing to fall apart is the false self, the identity you constructed to survive, to succeed, to be loved. You begin to question your job, your relationships, your beliefs. You begin to ask, why am I really doing this? And when the answers no longer satisfy you, a quiet panic sets in, because you realize that you've been living a life scripted by expectations, not by your essence. This is not just a psychological shift, it's an existential one. You may feel like you're losing your mind, but what you're really losing is the mask. This moment feels like death, and in a way, it is, not of your body, but of your ego identity, the persona that has been running your life. You might start to feel like a stranger in your own skin. Things that once excited you feel meaningless. Your goals seem arbitrary, your conversations shallow. You crave silence, solitude, depth, and yet there's a quiet, almost imperceptible freedom emerging. A tiny part of you knows, I can't go back. You're shedding your skin. The collapse of the old identity is painful, yes, but it's sacred, because underneath all the layers, the ambitions, the wounds, the stories, something real is waiting. Jung called this collapse the beginning of the individuation process, a descent into the unconscious for the sake of rebirth. It's the soul's refusal to be buried any longer. In this phase, you may experience a loss of interest in things you used to love, a deep urge to be alone, not out of sadness, but from a desire to hear yourself, a painful realization that many relationships were built on versions of you that no longer exist, a feeling of being in between worlds, no longer who you were, not yet who you're becoming. This is a spiritual limbo, and it is not a mistake, it's the cocoon. Jung believed that the ego must surrender in order for the self to emerge, and surrender is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's the moment you stop pretending, the moment you stop performing, the moment you say, I don't know who I am anymore, and you mean it. That sentence, said in anguish, is often the soul's first cry. Laughter feels hollow. You try to explain what you're going through, but they don't understand. How could they? You're speaking the language of the soul now, and most of the world is still asleep. This is what I call the sacred separation. It hurts. It can feel like abandonment, rejection, loneliness, but underneath that pain is truth. You're not being punished. You're being freed. Freed from attachments that were tied to your old self. Freed from roles you no longer wish to play. Freed from relationships that fed your ego, but silenced your soul. Jung knew this phase. Well, he wrote about the necessity of withdrawing from the collective in order to reconnect with the self. He called it the night sea journey, a solitary voyage into the unconscious where you are remade. This is why you may feel a deep urge to pull back, to be alone, to simplify, to listen. It's not depression, it's realignment. You may find yourself saying no more often, even when you don't have a reason, feeling disconnected from old communities, seeking nature, stillness, quiet, letting go of relationships you never imagined losing, trusting a deeper intelligence that tells you it's time to let go. And in that letting go, something remarkable happens. The more you release what no longer matches your frequency, the more you create space for what does. New people arrive, new invitations, new ideas, creativity and pathways open up, not from striving, but from alignment. It's as if the world is rearranging itself around your awakening, and in truth, it is. So if you're experiencing this sacred separation, if synchronicities are increasing while old ties are falling away, don't fight it. Honor it. It means the old chapter is closing, and the real story, the one your soul came here to live, is finally beginning. The return to the self, living from the soul. There comes a day, not with fanfare, but with stillness, when you wake up and feel different, not fixed, not perfect, but real. Something inside you has settled, not because all your questions were answered, but because you've learned how to live without needing all the answers. This is the return to the self. After the collapse of ego, after the dark encounter with your shadow, after the whisper of the inner voice, after the shedding of old relationships and identities, you arrive at a new inner home, and it feels like coming back to something ancient, something familiar, something that was always there, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the pretending. The self has no need to impress, no urge to compare. It simply is. To live from the self means to live in integrity, not perfection, but alignment. It means your words reflect your truth, your actions reflect your soul. Your presence carries something that can't be explained, a quiet magnetism, a depth, a groundedness that others feel, even if they don't understand it. You begin to make decisions from a place beyond logic. You begin to trust your inner rhythm. You stop forcing and start flowing. You stop chasing and start listening. Jung believed that the true self was not just a psychological reality, but a spiritual center, a kind of inner divinity that unites the opposites within you, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, body and spirit, heaven and earth. And when you begin to live from this place, you become a bridge. You no longer seek the world's approval because you found your own. You no longer abandon yourself to belong because you know where you belong. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to serve something larger than your ego, not as a sacrifice, but as an offering. Your life becomes your message. Your presence becomes your prayer. Your journey becomes a light for others still wandering in the dark. This is what the world needs now. Not more perfection, not more performance, but more self. More people living from the inside out. More people who have faced their wounds and emerged whole. More people who have returned home to their soul and stayed. Living from the self doesn't mean life becomes easy. You'll still have losses, still face fear, uncertainty, pain, but now you won't collapse because you've built something stronger than comfort. You've built truth, and truth, when lived from the soul, becomes freedom. So if you've made it this far in your journey, if you've felt the collapse, embraced the shadow, heard the whisper, lost what needed to be lost, and found something sacred within the silence, then welcome home. You are not who you were. You are who you are. And now, your life is no longer a reaction. It's a revelation. If everything looks the same but feels completely different, Your soul is probably awakening. You were never lost, only asleep, if you've made it this far. You already know this wasn't just a video. It was a mirror, a map, a remembering. You didn't come here by accident. Something inside you brought you. Maybe it was a whisper. Maybe it was pain. Maybe it was the quiet sense that your life was never truly yours until now. We've walked through the 5 signs of awakening the true self, the collapse of your old identity, the encounter with your shadow, the rising of a mysterious inner voice, the appearance of synchronicities, the sacred separations that leave you feeling alone but also finally free. And then the return. Not to who you were, but to who you've always been. This is not a journey everyone takes. Most people will live and die inside the persona, believing they are the mask, fearing the unknown, avoiding their own depth. But you didn't. You listened, you slowed down, you turned inward, and in doing so you touched something eternal. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That's what this path is. Not an escape from life, but a deeper arrival into it. Not a self-improvement project, but a radical act of soul remembrance. So what now? Now, you walk forward, not as someone who knows it all, but as someone who is awake, aware, aligned. You begin to trust the voice within. You honor the silence. You let go of what no longer serves you, not out of judgment, but out of love. You live differently, speak differently, love differently. You become not a copy of someone else's path, but a unique expression of the self, a living symbol of integration, a lighthouse for others still lost at sea. And when the doubt returns, and it will, when the shadow reappears, and it must, when the silence feels too loud, remember, you've already been through the fire. You've already faced the dark, and you came out not just alive, but whole. This journey doesn't end. It deepens every day in small, sacred ways. So ask yourself now, what am I no longer willing to betray? In myself, what is quietly calling me forward? And who am I when I stop pretending? Don't rush the answers. They will rise in their own time. For now, just know your awakening has already begun, and nothing will ever be the same again. Your soul has waited lifetimes for this moment. Honor it, protect it, live it. Thank you for walking this path. Thank you for remembering. Until next time, keep listening to what only you can hear.